This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We are coming to you on Sunday, June 30th. And the Cubs have a bad week, Brendan. They dropped 2 of 3 in Milwaukee. That was preceded by dropping 3 of 4 in San Francisco. And I'll tell you, Brendan, I had initially this morning thinking about last night and how the game went. I had planned to come on here and launch straight into an effusive, loud praising of our leader, perhaps our captain now, in Justin Steele. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that moment. But I think very typical of the 2024 Chicago Cubs that they have that moment that we all see. It's widely talked about. Some of us on this podcast got themselves a viral social media moment by, clipping that. I'm not going to name any names.
I'm just available. My best ability is availability, Corey.
But very typical of the 2024 Chicago Cubs to have that moment that unites really most, if not all, of the fan base. Feels like a potential galvanizing, let's go on a run. Like it doesn't erase all of the troubles from the team, but like maybe this is that moment that we all look back on that turns the season around, whatever. And we get to Sunday. Nico starts the game, homering on the second pitch. You're thinking maybe that was the moment. And then the rest of the game, like so much of this season, Brendan, just an absolute dumpster fire. Galvanizing moment, gone in the wind, more bad baseball, more errors, more grand slams for the opposing teams. And here we are with another series loss.
There's a lot to talk about. I can go into several different directions based on what you introduced. I'll start before we talk about Steele. In general, the defensive mishaps that we've seen this year, the outs on the bases that we've seen this year is completely unacceptable. We can go through offensive funks. The projections may not be accurate. Guys may regress. But at the very least, when the front office goes and signs the most expensive manager in history, gets rid of a World Series folklore legend, and pays $10 million for that position, at the bare minimum, I expect absolute whistle clean baseball.
Yeah.
That's it. Botching pickles, losing baseballs in the lights, making outs on the bases, lack of awareness. However you want to describe the mishaps and the errors, it's unacceptable that this team has made the most outs on the bases. And even if you look at outs on the bases at second, at third base, at first base with runners on, third most outs in the league. This is unacceptable. Whatever the reason, whatever the process, that can't happen. And to be frank, I'm more upset about the general offensive malaise. But when I have to watch games where I also see that, it draws a visceral ire, Corey.
Yeah. So here's what I want to talk about on today's show. A lot of the stuff that is continually an issue for this team.
I'm already working myself up. It's been 2 minutes.
It's going to be one of those episodes, but again, I had hoped it would be the other direction. I really hoped it would be focusing on that Steele moment,
Nico's home run,
as they won 2 of 3, but it's going to take a slightly different direction. Some things that I do want to get to in this podcast, though, just to lay out somewhat of an agenda for you. I do want to talk about Kyle Hendricks on Sunday. He's had that good outing in relief against St. Louis. It's quality start, but then and look good for most of today. But then that 7-run inning obviously derails. You can have whatever feeling you want about Kyle should have been out of the inning if Ian Happ catches a catchable fly ball, but still, he wasn't as sharp today, gives up the grand slam, et cetera, et cetera. I do want to talk about Porter Hodge. I know he has caught your attention, Brendan. He's been quite good since his MLB debut for the Chicago Cubs. So I do want to talk about Porter Hodge and the potential there, the potential bullpen role there. Luke Little doing some nice work this weekend. I want to talk about Cody Bellinger. I know that's a big discussion point. I think we've broken down a lot of these players in depth, but maybe not Bellinger as much in the last, few weeks and things like that. Talk about Javier Assad. That was a discussion that we've had in terms of his short starts. What does that look like? He's pushing on innings limits. How is that going to look? And unfortunately, he lands on the IL. That's sort of answering part of that, at least to start. But yeah, I see our good friend Greg Hutz in the chat. And Ethan Roberts is back. That's very exciting. That's very happy to see for him. I do want to start with Justin Steele, though. Again, it did not wake the team up, as he eloquently put it on Saturday. They took a snooze on Sunday. That being said, I do want to talk about that moment. And you and I had a conversation last week about how the team felt a little flat, about how a lot of their post-game commentary and the commentary from Jed or Carter or Dansby when they talk, things like that, was so focused on we just got to be better. It's frustrating, but we'll get there. We believe in this group, this, that, and the other. And what boiled over was you watch that inning on Saturday, and it was another. It's one thing if this team is just losing games. One thing if they're pressing, they're struggling, things like that. But what that inning on Saturday encompassed was what we've seen through so much of this season, which is not just getting beat or the other team hitting a good pitch and you lose on a home run. It was a lack of fundamentals and an embarrassing level of play, especially on the defensive side. As you mentioned, we talked about the outs on the bases and things like that. But that inning, it had it all for the 2024 Chicago Cubs. It had messing up a rundown. It had lack of fielding, soft infield grounders, not turning double plays or making outs quick enough. And then the new one, which is a really fun one to continually watch this team and different players mess up, is it seems, Brendan, that no one else in the outfield knows how fast PCA is. They're all surprised that he's next to them or calling them off or anything. It's as if they've never seen the guy run. They have no idea where he is. There's no awareness, as you said, as a pop-up drops in shallow center field because three of them can't communicate with each other to catch a ball.
Yeah.
It was another embarrassing low-level display from a $200+ million team with veterans, highly paid players, and the highest paid manager in baseball history. And whether it doesn't erase all that we've seen, it doesn't erase that inning. But thank you to Justin Steele for finally showing that emotion. It was about time that somebody expressed that this level of play was not acceptable.
Yeah.
We know it's not acceptable. I don't think that they go into the clubhouse and laugh it off or anything. I'm sure these standards are set. These plays are talked about. But as fans, sometimes it's nice to just see it. That's what I said last week. I don't know if I want Counsell to get ejected, throw a trash can, Lou Piniella, throw a base, whatever. I don't know what I want, but I want to see something, some fire, some life from this team, some clear acknowledgement that shares the frustration we share of watching them not be able to execute a rundown like they teach kids in middle school. And we got that moment from Justin Steele. I don't care if it didn't turn into a winning streak and a series win on Sunday. I don't care if some people, because I see it out there too. I think there was something with Stroman over the weekend too. Some people don't like the players yelling at their teammates in public. They deserve to be yelled at, Brendan. They deserve to be embarrassed by having a national moment that everybody sees on TV, that everybody's talking about. Their play has been embarrassing from the start of the season to now. And it's not, again, not just about losing. It's about these poor fundamentals, these poor decisions, these just low-level plays we've seen from them. And I'm glad Justin Steele showed that emotion. I'm glad he showed he cares, and I'm glad to see it bubble over like that. They deserved to have that moment, the rest of the team. And to be clear, and even listening to him in the postgame, Justin Steele holds himself to the same standard. He's not above it. It wasn't a show up your teammates or anything like that. It was a we have to be better than this. We keep doing this, and it's not acceptable. You can keep saying we're better than this. We got to turn it around. We got to do this, but you need to see it. And this was yet another inning, another one of just this nonsense, this poor play, this garbage from this team. I tweeted during the inning that it was another clown show. That's what it felt like. And so I'm glad Justin Steele did it. That is what leadership looks like. Not all the time, but sometimes tough love is what you need. We all think back to Rizzo yelling at Aroldis Chapman, and that was a moment you felt like he was a leader of this team. He bled for the Chicago Cubs and for them to play well on the field and deliver results. And that's what that moment felt like for Justin Steele, whether it turns into a season-saving moment or anything like that. That's what you want to see from players. It's a sport. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of tension and adrenaline. Stuff boils over. They should be frustrated, and I was glad to see it.
Glad to see it. Overdue. When I saw it, I texted you. I'm like, oh my God. Steele just went berserk in the dugout, like Carlos Zambrano style. But the difference between Zambrano and Steele is Zambrano may have done that more frequently. The fact that it came from Steele, someone who's shown to be even measured throughout the course of his career. He himself has said he doesn't scream that often on the mound. There's only been a few instances, one against the Giants last year and one in London. Steele's pretty even mannered. When a player shows that type of emotion, when the expectation is him being relatively calm, it means more. And those instances, I believe personally, are necessary. Of course, you don't want to maybe show your teammates up. It is embarrassing, but it's not to gloss over as each one of these blowups is being the same. This is different in that it came from Steele. It was rare, and it was a consequence of 2 months of poor, embarrassing play. Some level of accountability had to be had. Now, Steele said he should have controlled his emotions and done that behind the scenes. Likely going forward, he may do that more. He's still young, growing through the process as well. David Ross, for example, as a player, not as a manager, but Anthony Rizzo was talking about Ross and the impact he had. And Rizzo would say that within the clubhouse, Ross would straight up come to Rizzo, say, hey, you're effing flat today. And that's the accountability that keeps guys and their brains in tune, intact, attention. The level of attention on the field doesn't inspire confidence, doesn't inspire that the process is optimal. So when a team gets yelled at, when you're embarrassed in front of your teammates, coming from a guy who never does that, it means more. I personally think that's leadership. I think that's putting yourself out there, risking your embarrassment, screaming at your teammates in front of cameras to inspire wins, to change the dynamics of the team. Unfortunately, the next day, they hit snooze. They went 0 for 20 after Nico Horner hit a home run to lead off the game. It's unfortunate, but I finally felt as if this team, this roster, was showing some public sense of urgency and an idea that they are not satisfied. As a fan, forget the wins, I felt heard for once all season.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of those things, and I see it in our YouTube chat. If you're in our YouTube chat, hello, welcome. Appreciate you joining us on this fine Sunday afternoon. Drop in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. If you're listening on your podcast feed later, hello, happy Monday. Have a good day at work, wherever you may be listening. I don't think some folks in the chat saying like there's nothing to wake up this team. They're not going to get woken up. They need better players. They should have been woken up months ago, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I hear you. I agree. Like I said, the moment from Steele doesn't have to turn into anything in a vacuum from him and where we are in this team. I like the moment. That's the point of this discussion. It doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to turn them around. That's not, Steele's responsibility. But I think ultimately I'm just glad to see it. As we said, it just felt it gets tiring hearing all those empty platitudes from the front office and from the other players. And they don't need to, Dansby doesn't have to go on his podcast and spend the whole hour saying, I need to be better. I'm mad at myself like that. I'm not asking for that. But we keep watching this same piss poor baseball repeatedly. And at some point, it's just nice to see something from someone that expresses what we feel as fans, which is this is unacceptable. It's been going on all year and we're tired of it. And somebody show us that this standard is not acceptable. So that's what it is. But unfortunately, as we said, it, at least for the moment, does not turn into a galvanizing moment, a thing that turns the season around. They, get their bell rung on Sunday, and that caps off, as we said, a 2-5 week. So ultimately, they didn't capitalize on the 9-game homestand. They had a rough trip here, and now they come home. The couple of the Philly stars are injured, Brendan, so you'll miss them. But I'm not so sure that that's going to matter. So ultimately, that's where it is. And so, it was another frustrating weekend in Milwaukee. And that's what you got. And, then after you kind of pull back from the Steele moment, and giving him all the credit in the world for that, like I said, it's what leadership looks like, not all the time, but sometimes that tough love is necessary. And if, I know he said, he felt a certain way after the game or whatever, but if his teammates didn't want to be embarrassed, they shouldn't play embarrassing baseball. So
yeah, I know. I knew you were going to say that too. That's such a typical
that's
Corey
how it
thing.
is. If they don't
Yeah.
want to be called out by that, then they shouldn't play embarrassing baseball. And then those moments wouldn't need to happen. Anyway, so that leaves us in a similar spot. Like you said, Sunday was a very familiar game from the offense. Nico Horner gets it started and then just nothing for the rest of the game. So that's where we have it. We'll talk about it. There's plenty to talk about. But I think, I see it in the YouTube chat too. Like, I don't know, man. The council discussion and all of this, I don't know. I still believe he's an excellent manager. I think these players got to be better. I had wanted to see some of that fire from him. Same as, if you remember last year, like we were clamoring for David Ross to at some point defend Seiya Suzuki when he was getting all those bad calls. Occasionally, you always want to see that from the manager. But I think this is one of those where it's, the roster isn't good enough. The team's not good enough. But yeah, as you said, Brendan, when you are paying a manager that much, he's not the one running the bases. He's not the one messing up a rundown, things like that. But buck stops with you. It's your team. You're the manager. You're the one making all the money. Like, I think it's fair for people to, I think it's fair for people to expect more when you're the leader of the team, whether you can control it all directly or not. It's your clubhouse.
Well, you're getting paid that amount of money to make sure that the environment and process is 100% functioning. When you make errors, when you make outs on the base paths, it represents something is not functioning. Now, to be clear, I still have a lot of confidence in Council. I think he runs laps around David Ross in projecting the worst case scenarios in the future. I think he makes more right decisions than wrong decisions. And the criticism of the defensive base running, I'll be quite honest, it is kind of minor in the grand scheme of things, especially when the roster is quite literally broken at this point, 7 games under 500. But it boils over in frustration when you see those mistakes made. At the very least, as I said before I do the ad break, I expect perfect fundamentals. I demand perfect fundamentals. And I do demand it. And especially when we have a precedence of 2016 when they were perfect defensively. on the base paths. They didn't make any mistakes. And so I'm always reminded of that, even if you have all the talent in the world, fundamentals. And that does stop with the guy in the dugout making all the calls. You do have to have some introspection. And frankly, Craig, I need better results from the fundamental perspective. Let me do the ad break here. We'll get back at it.
Yeah.
Mando whole body deodorant. We will have you smelling great all summer. Mando's array of odor controlling solutions ensures you'll be fresh from head to toe. The solid stick and invisible cream tube control odor for 72 hours, but you can start odor control in the shower with the 4-in-1 cleansing bar and a set of acidified body wash, which helps stop odor before it even starts. I personally love how fresh Mando smells. It is clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. 12 hours after a shower, the average man's grundle odor level was a 5 out of 10, but with Mando, the average grundle odor is a 0 out of 10. Mando starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, again, that cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. We have a discount code to help you get hooked on your favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers can get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code CHGO. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code CHGO at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Link is in the description below. Shady Rays, be ready for the season with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break your bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering your world-class rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for outdoor adventures, especially when you play in Milwaukee, where the sun comes in. I put my Shady Rays on, watching the game on TV. I don't know what the hell is going on in that stadium over there. It was so bright. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. They probably have a style in your team's favorite colors. Personally, I love the light brown, slightly transparent Shady Rays. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com. Use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people.
All right, Brendan, back at it.
Back at it.
And, really thinking back on the whole week, the show that Brendan and I do here on Sundays is, meant to be a weekly recap. We've said it a lot, Brendan, but what continues to be especially frustrating, and we were in the parking lot at American Family Field, whatever that place is called. And I was talking to our guys, Ryan Herrera and Jared Willis, about something we've talked about, which is what remains especially frustrating watching this team all weekend. And again, that 4-game series in San Francisco is to look back on all of our off-season discussions and the off-season discussions of other writers and podcasters and people in this space, and to look at this week and to say, oh, so the Cubs can't score enough runs. They blow a bunch of leads and they play in a lot of close one-run games that come down to little itty-bitty margin things, and they lose a lot of those. You don't say. Get out of here. Who could have possibly predicted that? And, so we sit here on a Sunday after a 2-5 week, and I remain just especially annoyed. I keep saying this. I don't care if you and I are right. I don't get paid by the Chicago Cubs to be right about all these decisions, to be right about every free agent. But it's so annoying at how predictable this season was. And all of these games you watch, and it's so predictable, Brendan. And it's especially frustrating that this deep into this process, the retool, whatever you want to call it, under Jed Hoyer's leadership, produces such a predictable outcome this deep into the season. And even he was talking the other day, he said it's too early to talk about selling or the trade deadline and things like that. But he admitted they've dug themselves a hole and they have to start playing better. And you look around, we've looked at this before, but after this series in Milwaukee, you are sitting 11 and a half games behind the Milwaukee Brewers, who once again, for another year, continue to outclass you in a division that should be yours to be running at this point, at least at this point, Brendan, this many years removed from when it was last a division you were sitting on top of. And then you look at this wild card race, five out of the final wild card spot. And the only two teams you're not behind in the National League are the two that are beyond out of it, the Marlins and the Colorado Rockies. Everybody else in the National League is on top of the Chicago Cubs. We talked about it. You can use whatever word you want. Frustrating, unacceptable, et cetera, yada, yada. It remains just
Exhausting.
Exhausting is a good word. Unbearable. I don't even know, but it remains especially frustrating that this was exactly the concern so many of us had. It's down to how they would play the games, Brendan, like specifically how the games would play out. And we just sit here and watch it every night.
Every single night, every single Sunday morning, afternoon, we suffer through this. Actually, Greg Huss tweeted out, I believe it was Saturday, and it kind of resonated with me. And to paraphrase Greg's tweet, he said the tone from the fan base being more negative is a disservice to bringing in young fans like Greg's former self, who grew up in an environment of fans who are generally more optimistic. Wait till next year. And it kind of resonated because I do see such negativity around this franchise. And while I understand this because the expectation has now risen with a World Series and a ton more money involved, I'm disappointed that a lot of these errors or poor play just amplifies that negativity, and it clouds the optimism. And I wish we can get back to a point where we're talking about maybe some of the more optimistic trends that we're seeing. I don't like coming on the show, Corey, talking with you about all these numbers. I rather talk about the next guy coming up. I rather talk about what PCA is doing, even though he's kind of in a funk. I rather talk about Porter Hodge's cut right fastball. I rather talk about Justin Steele's new sinker and changeup. But it's difficult because at the same time, I also see everyone in the chat. They're frustrated. They're spending out money. You spent thousands. You're an idiot, by the way. You spent thousands of dollars on season tickets, right? And so it's such a delicate balance. And those errors in that poor play just unearths that negativity. And that's why I dial in on some of the fundamental errors that we're seeing. I would love, and I will do, by the way, because I maybe I am more generally optimistic, but I would love to get back to a point as you and I podcasted in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, many years now, where the overwhelming tone of those podcasts were what needs to happen next. And it was always underneath the cloud of optimism. And for the first time doing this in 10 years, I don't feel as if we have that. And it sucks. And it's a really bad feeling to have.
And I think, as you see in our YouTube chat, I think that stems from a few things. One, even you and I lowered our expectation threshold for this team. We weren't even holding them to being a World Series or bust team. We were going along with their plan and their timeline and all of that, and just hoping they could win a bad division, win a winnable division, be for sure fire on paper playoff team. And they couldn't even meet us at those expectations. And as a lot of people have said, you and I have talked about this a lot. Everything changed when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series in 2016. That did happen, but this doesn't feel like a moment for the bit.
Which year though? Which year?
2016.
I just froze. Cubs. I froze a little bit thinking about that John Lester jersey behind you.
Yeah, once they win the World Series, the white whale's been caught. It's just like an endless loop. The white whale's been caught, Brendan, and then the expectations go up. Ticket prices go up. The area around Wrigley gets built up, all this stuff. And after a while, even though a lot of us, just one before I die, et cetera, the years go on, start to say, well,
maybe two.
We're still
maybe
paying
3.
for these tickets. You're still raising these prices. You're still charging $14 for a beer. I think the team can continue winning. Yeah, we don't have to stop at the one. And we haven't been met there as a fan base. So I think that's why it is tough to focus on the positives and to be optimistic, because a lot of us have lowered our expectation threshold of what we're asking of a team with a top 5, continually top 10, often top 5 payroll, highest game day experience price in the league, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not even holding them to the highest standard that I think we should be holding them to. And they're not even meeting us there. It's disappointing. And there's no way to sugarcoat that. And like I said, kind of pairs well with the Steele thing. Like, it would be one thing if they're just losing games, just not happening. It's not clicking. They're playing good baseball, but they're just getting beat on a nightly basis. Game of inches, things happen. That's not what's happening, dude.
Yeah.
They're playing an embarrassing level of defense on a nightly basis, sometimes the base running on a nightly basis. And I don't recall I generally don't recall an offense that felt this like lifeless and flat and passive in a long time. I don't recall watching. I mean, you can count like 2021, like the latter part, I guess, but I don't think that really, that's not what I mean,
No, it's for the first time doing this with you now for almost 10 years. This is the most exhausted I've been covering a team. We can go back to 2018 and that late Brewers run that won the division. We can go back to 2019 and the termination of the Madden era. Those were frustrating. Still during those eras, there was still some general sense of optimism. Theo Epstein was great at this. He was so good painting a rosy picture, even if the current times were dark. And you trusted a front office and you trusted Theo because he had just won the World Series and he had won multiple World Series prior to coming over to the Cubs. This time is different because baseball's changing so fast. The current front office in their 4th season has missed the mark. It does represent some broken processes. It does make you think if they have the right system in place to capture the next winning era. And that is what's distracting. And I see all this in the chat. It's, should we trade Nico? Should we trade Hap? Can we trade Bellinger? When will we fire Hoyer? And we never really have those types of discussions ever, where it's completely moving over. And that degree of change is unprecedented.
Yeah.
Even before Tom Ricketts bought this team.
And I mean, it is going to be an interesting discussion. Obviously, you start July here tomorrow, and we've noted, it's not exactly an easy schedule coming up for the Cubs before the All-Star break. You have 3 with Philly at home. The Angels come to Wrigley Field. Then you have 3 on the road in Baltimore and 4 on the road in St. Louis. That's not a particularly easy schedule, especially because Philly is really good, even if certain players are hurt or not. They're really good, whether Bryce Harper is in the lineup or not. Baltimore, really good. That offense, good luck to the Cubs pitching staff on that one. And St. Louis, you haven't played well against all season. And that's a series on the road and amidst a pretty tough schedule here with only a couple off days. So this is a tough schedule. So if they're going to bail themselves out, it's going to have to be soon, and it's going to have to be against some good competition.
But it does trade for Gunnar Henderson. Your problem
it does
solved.
Start to get the conversation moving into a direction of, like what does a trade deadline look like, and how do you build for the future? Because we've talked about it. You have a bloated roster that is underperforming. So when you look at making additions, if you're not moving certain guys around, it gets difficult to figure out, well, if you want to add a power outfielder, where's he playing? Who's he playing over with this current roster? You want to add a first baseman. Who's DHing? Who's playing first base every night? Like, where are these guys going? And it's easy to look at third base with Morel's overall production and the continued defensive unease, we'll call it that. Catcher position, obviously, it's been a nightmare for this team all year. But Those are only a couple positions, and sometimes those aren't the easiest positions. Plucking great catchers that are either great defensively or great offensively or both is not the easiest exercise in baseball, especially when you sit out trades where those players move. But let your division rival go and get your old catcher's brother, who's now an all-star and all that. But I digress. It's not like I'm mad about that or anything.
Yeah, I can tell.
You're going to have to move things around. If you want to add money and stay under the tax, you got to move money around. If you want guys to play certain positions, then you have to move some of the guys that might play those positions. So it does become a very interesting conversation going forward. If this roster costs this much and is performing at such a level, well, then that's too much money and it's not getting you where you want to be. So do you trade some of these guys? I think anything is on the table for this team, Brendan, because what you have right now is not good enough. And it does not look like it is as simple as just adding one player and wiping your hands and saying, okay, great. Now it's solved. Now it's perfect. I think it's going to be more chess maneuvering than that. And let's jump into, I wanted to talk about Cody Bellinger, because I think it's an interesting conversation, and one that I think does highlight a good portion of what has gone wrong with this offense in particular. And I wanted Cody Bellinger back. I believe you wanted Cody Bellinger back. But we expressed concern throughout the entire offseason. I imagine I said this exact phrase on every single episode, Brendan, that even before they signed him, we kept saying, well, if you just re-sign Bellinger, you're just replacing the offense you got last year. If you don't sign Bellinger, then you've lost your best overall producer. So then when they did sign Bellinger, it was like, that's great. You've replaced that production, hopefully, but you didn't add anything to it. We expressed that the entire offseason, and here we are. The issue is that Cody Bellinger is not performing like he did last year. He is underperforming that. Now, as you tweeted today, and I know you'll get into some of the metrics and things like that, his overall production is fine. He's a very good defender. He's a very good base runner, and his overall offensive production is fine. They're not paying him to be fine. The roster is not constructed for him to be fine. That is not necessarily Cody Bellinger's fault. He's given a contract. He signs it. He's doing his best. He wants to earn more money. I think in his mind, he'd like to outperform it, opt out, and get a nice, big, long contract from someone, whether that's the Cubs or not. But when he's your big ad, bringing him back, as we've talked about, you're putting him in a position where he has to perform at a certain level, because you're asking him to be your biggest run producer. You're asking him to be one of the middle of the order bats. I was looking at a thread from our friend Matt Clapp, and he tweeted during the game today that Cody Bellinger last hit a ball at least 315 feet on June 16th. He has, 9 homers?
Yeah.
That is not enough slug from the guy you're paying to be your slugger. And again, it's all back to Jed. This is his roster. He built the roster to the point that Cody Bellinger needed to be that guy. But him not being there, it drastically affects this offense's ability. And again, that's not to say that it's like, let's be mad at Cody Bellinger or anything like that. It's the person who put the roster together. But Bellinger not being at that exact level that he was by the end of last year, and that overall production, it hurts this offense because that's how it was constructed.
It was necessary for Bellinger to mirror what he produced in the second half last season. That was necessary given all of our different projections from the current roster. At this time last year, the Cubs were in a similar place. And in fact, on July 17th, they were 7 games below 500. July 17th. They won 10 of their next 11 games. It changed the Cubs' outlook. They bought Jeimer Candelario and Jose Cuas. They did that not just from one guy performing well. Across the lineup, they performed well. Gomes, Talkman, Bellinger, Swanson, Horner, Morel, Seiya. They all hit well over 300 in that 10-game span. They all slugged with isolated powers on average of 260, the entire squad. After that trade deadline, two guys carried over that type of production. Seiya Suzuki and Cody Bellinger. Both those guys through September had weighted on base averages over 400. Right now, the Cubs not only need that boost from the entire lineup, but they need two guys to fill the same void that was filled by Bellinger and Seiya last season. Bellinger on pace for 18 home runs is a disappointment. No matter however you want to chop that up, the contract in a vacuum of $28 million per year, they're paying him to be about a 3-win player. He's on pace to be a 2-win player. A league average player, that's fine. He's not a massive disappointment, a massive bust, but he's not living up to expectations. Unfortunately, that's our reality. Why that's happening, I'm not entirely sure, but it's a result of a long-term funk, Corey. If we look at Bellinger's last 7 weeks, this has been going on. His expected weighted on base average since May 8th has steadily declined and plateaued at 260. He's at an expected weighted on base average for 7 weeks of 260. I mean, we can be frustrated with everyone else on the team. I can be frustrated at Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner recently, say everyone, but they can't afford their 3-hitter to perform that poorly. And that was always a possibility. It's built into his contract. He did not get paid 180 plus million over 7 years because this potential was always accounted for by other teams. We're seeing it now. There's still room to turn it around like the Cubs did last season, but it is going to take an instant change. And it's going to take an instant change from Cody Bellinger and the rest of the team. But most importantly, it has to come from Cody Bellinger. He is the anchor of this lineup. And until we see him emerge, there's always going to be some underlying negativity of the entire outlook for the season.
Well, and so this again, though, like just to make it clear, is what I think the key frustration is with Jed and how this roster was built. You were banking on Cody Bellinger repeating or coming near repeating one season out of his last several. It was always a dangerous game. And this was always a possibility. Again, he's having a fine season, but you're not paying him to be a fine player. You didn't build your lineup for him to be a fine player. You needed him to be the person he was in that latter portion of last season.
And in
you
a vacuum,
gambled on that.
it's a good contract too, by the way. 3 years, around 28 million per year. That's a good gamble, right? As you're saying. But when you gamble only on that to stabilize your offense, then there's some wavering, some shakiness with that gamble.
Well, and when it pairs with how the rest of the team is built. Again, Michael Busch, we've talked about it, has been great. That trade looks very nice. He's not performing at an elite level, but he's looked, I know you tweeted this too, like much better on defense throughout the year. He's clearly improving at the position from when we started the year. He looks good, like a nice piece to the lineup. But you also took a calculated risk in Christopher Morel. As much as we have talked about the good process from Morel, the K rate still down about 10% from last year. Walk rate still up 3 or 4% from last year, but the results are not there, Brendan. And the defense has been suspect all season. He's gotten better, I think, a little bit in certain aspects. The throws look better, more to Michael Busch's chest, things like that, but still whiffing on some plays, dropping some balls, just unease is, I think, is whatever word you want to use there. But you look at the overall production, now he's a sub 100 WRC plus guy, 15 homers. Obviously, you like that, but the overall numbers are not good enough. The batting average, the OPS, all of this, if the process doesn't lead to those results, it's July. You put him at third base, a premium hitting position. You're not getting the defense. You're not getting the production in the lineup. And again, Christopher Morel's 24 years old. I believe in him long-term as a hitter. But this team was constructed that you needed a better version of Cody Bellinger. You needed to hit on some of these known risks. Michael Busch looks good. You've got PCA in there. He's 22 years old, trying to learn how to hit at the major league level. It might take a second.
Yeah.
Might take a minute, but you can't
It is
really
taking a minute.
afford that. Yes, it's taking a minute, but he's 22 years old, Brendan.
Yeah.
Like Dansby has been hitting better, but still not where he needs to be. Nico finally looking good, hitting some homers. Maybe that hand is finally feeling better, but he's
Who
getting up
knows?
there where you need him to be. And your catching position has been an absolute nightmare the
Yeah.
entire season. So the premise of this roster was always built. I think our guy, Cody Delmendo in the chat just said this, like it was built around Bellinger coming back, getting around that same level of production, and these other guys stepping up. You've gotten it in some areas, but when you risk, hey, hopefully all these unproven, unknown commodities need to hit for this offense to be good, well, they're not. And so guess what? This is where we are.
All right, so let's take an ad break here. You're depressing me over there. You're depressing me.
We can talk about Porter Hodge next if you want.
Nah, I think we should stay on this tone.
All right, we'll ride it
You're
out.
you're the lead guy. You do whatever you want.
Okay.
Lucy Nicotine, 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. Available in pouches, gum, and our favorite, breakers. Breakers are pouches, but with a capsule of liquid flavor inside that helps saturate the pouch. Breakers are available in 4 milligrams or 8 milligrams. Favorite flavors from us include mint, berry, citrus, and espresso. Mint is great, great flavor to get your day boosted, especially in the afternoon. Let's level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/CHGO Cubs and use promo code CHGO Cubs to get 20% off your first order. Lucy offers free shipping and has a 30-day refund policy if you do change your mind. That's lucy.co and use code CHGO Cubs to get 20% off and always free shipping. Here comes the fine print. Lucy's products are only for adults of legal age, and every order is age verified. Warning, this product does contain nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Order is age verified. For your new Chevy, make Ray Chevrolet your first draft pick. Visit our partners this June and going forward to shop their summer sales event going on all month long at Ray Chevy on Route 12 in Fox Lake and at raychevrolet.com. As one of the top selling Chevy dealers in the Midwest, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest Chevy inventories. Plus, find the perfect tailgate vehicle right now. $12,000 off MSRP on a new 2024 Chevrolet Silverado, or lease the new 2024 Chevy Trax for only $179 a month for 24 months. Or cruise into June. Today's your last day. Go ahead and cruise out there and shop over 125 of their vehicles priced under $20,000. And if you ever heard of Ray Chevrolet, then you also have heard of Ray's Price Promise. Their guarantee to make your next vehicle more affordable than ever with no price changing, no add-ons, and no hidden fees ever. That means the incredible prices we're talking about now, you can expect to see the very same when you shop Ray Chevy in stores or online. Shop the summer sales event all month long, including today, by visiting Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake or raychevrolet.com. They've been serving the community since 1963. Together, let's drive.
All right, Brendan. I see our guy Niren in the chat. I think he's pandering to you.
Okay.
Cubs
What is he
trade for
saying?
Gossman. Horton comes up. Trade for
All
Brandon
right.
Lowe to play third base.
Now we're talking.
Mo comes up. Owen Casey, DH.
Yeah.
GMing is easy. That one was for you. He's
Listen,
pandering to you with the Gosman.
Niren's a smart guy over there.
He
So
is.
I appreciate that, Niren. It's a good suggestion.
So let's talk. Again, look, like I think that's the state of the offense. It's been the state of the offense for some time. Some of the guys get going. We see better trends from some of them. Other guys go the other direction. And overall, even the guys you're getting solid, good production from, it's not at that elite level. It's not at that strong enough level to really carry the lineup. And so at best, it feels like even when things are going, you have a lot of good complementary hitters, good hitters that can fit into a lineup, but you don't have the stars, you don't have the big guys to round out said lineup. And then unfortunately, at any given time, you have 2 to 3 or 4 just kind of black holes in the lineup.
Yeah.
And, we were at the CHGO tailgate takeover in Milwaukee on Saturday. And, we were talking with some of the folks in our group. And I remember there was an occasion, I think later in the game, when PCA came up and Dansby was on second, I believe. And, like, should he bunt? There was one out. Should he bunt? Because he bunts a lot. Would you bunt him over to try to get the run in? And I was like, if the catching position wasn't hitting ninth, but what's the point of bunting? Like, they're not going to get a hit. So I'd rather PCA swing. Obviously, he's, struggling and still adjusting to major league pitching, but I'd rather he swing. Bunt for what? So that the catchers can ground out or strike out. What's the point of that? And so that's how it's felt for most of the year. Again, it does fall on, like, the guys need to be better. It's how the roster was constructed. It's not an easy ask, but you've seen Ian Happ kind of turn things around and get his numbers to at or better than his kind of career norms and things like that. That's what you need from the rest of these guys. You need those guys to do it. And then when that happens, you need Ian Happ to stay where he is, not then he goes into a funk, because that's how it's felt too. So I don't have the solve there. It was always a flawed offensive construction, and we're bearing the fruit of that pretty much on a daily basis. Go ahead.
I was saying there were positive signs early on with Morel, with Bush, especially in April. Now, Bush went through that funk, came out of it in June, looks pretty good. You look at the biggest contributors over the past 2 months: Ian Happ, Michael Bush. Since May 1st, this includes some of their early May slump, they have a 360 and 350 weighted on base average for Happ and Bush. The rest of the team, not even close. Nico 300, Dansby 290, PCA 220. Talkman had a great April. He's been injured, 285. I don't know what you do with Amaya. He's a 214 weighted on base average since the beginning of May. His pop-up time throwing to second base is among the worst in the league, and his framing is rating bad. I love his personality, but if this were a competitive team, you would have to get rid of Amaya. He's not doing anything well, and I hate to say that. I know he had an interesting upbringing through the system, several injuries. The pitchers like how he calls games. This is not good enough. He's performing among the worst catchers I've ever seen in recent memory with Amaya. So it's good that you see Happ and Bush start to produce like this. But then the question is, what about Christopher Morel? He's produced at league average over the past 2 months. And there was always questions of saying, oh, well, just be patient, wait. The expected numbers look good. But since June, those expected numbers we've held on to are no longer there. Since the beginning of June, his expected WOBA has actually gone down. And over the course of the last 3 weeks, his expected weight on base average is under 300. So that process that was yielding positive batted ball profiles is no longer there. And that does make you think, okay, well, why is that happening? And does this mean that maybe Council should start to spread out at bats differently? And maybe if the Cubs do end up being competitive, should they at least account for the possibility that Morel will have to go through a funk again? Now, I still think he looks generally optimistic. The whiff rates have not gone back up. The walk rate, to your earlier point, has remained steady. And generally, he hits the ball harder than most guys. It's just it hasn't resulted in base hits nor a positive batted ball profile. I still think he gets there, but right now it's not good enough to project a competitive team.
Yeah, and look, as we talked about, again, with the roster construction, he was asked to be the cleanup hitter for the majority of the season until,
And
recently, as we had talked about for weeks before it happened, like, moved out of that cleanup spot. Doesn't matter if you believe in the trends or what the expected data say. When he's your cleanup hitter, you need results. It's July.
It's crazy.
Like, I love the guy. I believe in him as a hitter long term, but that stuff doesn't matter when the results don't come 4 months into the season.
And they're asking him to learn a new position in your 4th year in a competitiveness and at cleanup.
And in order for that to
ask.
offset the defensive issues, he can't be a league average hitter.
He needs to be a 360 plus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's frustrating. Anecdotally, it feels like he's in a weird spot where he has bought into his ability to have
Agree.
that plate discipline,
Agree. He's missing his pitches.
and he's missing his pitches.
Missing his pitches.
He's now in that spot where he has to fine tune the adjustment because he's taking hittable fastballs for strike 3. And
Yeah.
he's clearly either looking for a different pitch or he's chasing a walk in some of those at bats. Again, I'm not in his head. I'm not dissecting every single at bat like a hitting coach. But when you see guys taking hittable fastballs, like over the plate, very hittable fastballs, especially for a hitter like him, for strike 3, and kind of giving that like, what kind of look, you're caught in between. The process is veering, I think, too much in maybe patience, and you're sacrificing a little. It almost reminds you of Seiya a little bit.
I was about to say the same thing. Like a more extreme version of Seiya.
Yes. You love the plate discipline. You don't want guys swinging at bad pitches. Walks are good, despite what I think Dusty Baker once said about Adam Dunn, if I remember correctly.
You did say that. Well done.
Yeah. But you have to be aggressive as well, especially when you're able to put so much oomph on the ball like Seiya and Morel can. You got to be swinging at hittable pitches, So I think he's in between one of those adjustments periods. Like, you love the K rate coming down, but you have to find that right balance between doing that and keeping your aggressiveness to the point that you're ready to jump on a center cut fastball in a 2-strike count where you should be looking to protect the plate anyway, instead of just staring at it as it goes by. That's my, loose analysis of that.
And I agree. We have a comment from Nick Mataram. He says, quote, "I feel these nerd metrics, no offense to you, Brendan, I appreciate that, Nick, have swayed the Cubs too much. I have to believe other teams look at the numbers, but then look at the player as a baller." I first off, I agree. These nerd metrics, especially how they're presented on broadcast on ESPN, I kind of hate it. And I know I'm doing this podcast and presenting all these graphs. I get it, but you guys are tuning into a niche podcast, by the way. So this is what we do. But I actually do agree with that. And when we listen to Cubs players, they actually don't use a lot of what we're talking about. I listened to Dansby Swanson and Ian Happ the past week. Swanson was ripping chase rate, contact rate. Happ's talking about situational hitting. They don't talk about the game that you and I talk about the game, Corey. So make that abundantly clear. At the same time, when we listen to Dustin Kelly and Bellinger and Morel talk about the changes they're making, especially when our guy Ryan Herrera talks about this, they look for their zones. They try to make the best swings based on their strengths. And for Seiya and Bellinger and Morel, that seems to be an ongoing process. With Bellinger, he did make that adjustment on elevated pitches last year. Seiya, second half, once he got ahead of the count, any pitch middle end, he was swinging at and crushing. This season, Seiya actually more aggressive when ahead of the count and swinging at pitches against the zone that shouldn't be swung at for damage. Ironically enough, Morel is a whole different brand, so many different changes on and off. He's still a young guy, 25, but it's too slow. That's where I come back at. No matter what metric we're talking about, expected metrics are always in retrospect. You can try to project going forward, but the biggest thing I always try to communicate and tell fans is that we're looking at snapshots of variability that have little projected value. Can't project this sport. You can only explain what happened. And everyone's always changing something, always changing something. And so you try to find those snapshots that explain the explanations in retrospect, while also, to your point, Corey, looking at what's going on in the current moment. In the current moment, they're missing their pitch for some reason. And I don't exactly know why.
Well, and I think, just on the metric stuff, I do think, and I hope, I mean, it's my sincere hope that, Brendan and I, when we use a lot of those metrics, we're properly contextualizing them. And, I don't think that we are a show that just reads out those numbers and says, yeah, that number is good. And, there's no context or anything. I think we try, and hopefully do a good job of properly contextualizing when we want to use those. And I think our discussion of Morel is a good highlight of that. We weren't suggesting that because his expected weighted on base average or things like that, or even cutting the K rate and walk rate, which are simple metrics. Like, we weren't suggesting that his production was good because of those things. We were suggesting that he's 24 years old. he's a cost-controlled player who can be in this organization for several years. That stuff is worth paying attention to when you're trying to forecast how he might fit into those plans. But under no circumstances would we have told you that, well, yeah, his OPS is 670 and he's hitting 190, but he's good because of these things. I don't think that's what we said. I hope we do a good job of contextualizing all those things. And a lot of the time, using those metrics and talking through that type of lens, firstly, it's just how you and I kind of analyze the game and stuff like that. But it is also the stuff that these front offices use. I think even going back to the initial comment that, that Jed or the Cubs lean too much on that, I don't necessarily think that they did. I think when we went through the offseason, we were using a lot of those advanced metrics, WRC plus, weighted on base average in particular, to point out that they did not do enough on the offense using those metrics. So I think, and it is interesting because I think Dansby is a good kind of case study for the middle ground on that, because he's a player that weights well on wins above replacement, but the offense doesn't look great. And depending on how you value the defense and all of that, I understand why he's a little bit of, I don't want to say a poster child, but he's going to be someone that people look at when they say, well, I don't, he's a 5-win player. Who cares? I watch him, hit 240 with a, 700 OPS. I don't know how much I care about the wins above replacement, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I think in that regard, perhaps the Cubs front office improperly kind of calculated this, but I think using the advanced metrics, we told you all offseason that this offense wasn't going to be good enough, and that's what we were using. So I
Well,
hope we contextualize all of that properly, and it doesn't feel as though, we're just putting those numbers out and claiming it's good. And
yeah,
I hope we
exactly.
do a good job of that.
I this is a whole different conversation that we can have, but I even hate the premise of advanced metrics. The word usage of advanced metrics. This should be so intuitive. It should be so simplified that in a way the word advanced is pretentious. It really is. And when I watch like these ESPN broadcasts, they shove it down your throats like crazy. And I'm even watching, I'm like, stop it. I don't care about any of this because the context is not there. When you use these metrics, it should tell a story that's intuitive. Of course, when we watch Morel, oh, that makes sense. He's
Yeah.
not striking out that much. That's a good thing. I don't need to have expected WOBA and the calculations and everything be shoved and just leave it as is. It should tell a story. And I think my intention is always to tell that story and also share a lot of the same disappointment when the results don't come. And when the results don't come, we can try to contextualize why it's not aligning with batted ball profiles that tend to have better results. Anyway, I'll throw it back to you. Actually, let me do this ad break here before we continue on.
Yeah.
Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball, but only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Beer and baseball just go together. No beer goes better than the one that was literally born in a ballpark. I love Blue Moon. I love Blue Moon. Watching Justin Steele scream at the Cubs dugout. When I saw that, 3 Blue Moons were cracked open. Corey, I was so pumped up. It's a bold flavor, bright explosion of color, an iconic orange slice. Ritual guarantees a one-of-a-kind beer experience that's perfect for spring weather. It's best served with the signature orange garnished to showcase its beautiful hazy color. Bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian style wheat ale. It's one of a kind every time. Get Blue Moon delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon, made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. And by the way, that's why I don't think I'm a nerd, by the way. Like I totally get all the advanced metrics and noise and all that stuff. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, I also like the implication of the comment, because he apologized to you. I like the implication that I'm not a nerd. In that context, I appreciate that.
I don't think you're a nerd either. I really don't think both of us are nerds. I
Sure.
know some true nerds. So let me tell you.
I saw it earlier in our YouTube chat. We still have a couple things that we got to talk about, so we're gonna be a little long here today. Appreciate you tuning in on this Sunday. You guys know Brendan and I are The team can have a 2-5 road trip, Brendan, and we still might talk about them for 90 minutes because we're sick in the head.
We are
Nerd or
sick in the
not,
head.
we're definitely ill in the
Oh,
head.
100%.
Yeah, that I can
Yeah.
confirm.
Yeah.
So I saw it in the YouTube chat, and I can't find the comment, so I
Okay.
apologize for not giving credit because it did make me laugh.
Well, I'll find it.
It
What was
was
it?
it was related to when I said the thing about Dusty Baker and the walks, and someone replied, "At least the Cubs aren't clogging the bases."
Here
Dusty
it
would be
is. Got it.
happy.
Got
Yeah,
it.
from Nick, Nick G. Dusty would be happy the Cubs aren't clogging the bases. But then in parentheses says it's because someone was thrown out on the bases. It's very accurate. Right. They would take the walk and then get thrown out trying to advance to
Wait, is
third on
that
a
what
ball
two
that's
plan
right in
stands
front of
for?
them.
Is that what two plan stands for? Thrown out on the bases? Thrown out on the
Something like
bases.
that.
It's an
Yeah.
acronym. I had
Yeah,
no
it's an
idea.
acronym.
Get out of here. That's crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah, it's an acronym.
Yeah.
Uh, Google says thrown out on the bases like a nincompoop.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think I
I
knew
had no idea that's what it
yeah,
meant.
I don't think I knew that the N stood for that.
Look at that.
Couple super chats do want to get to. Fernando,
Yeah.
appreciate you as always. Hello, guys. Wish it was a better outcome today. Brendan and I get a lot of losses on the Sunday show. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Then we have one from Anthony Capriati. Appreciate that, Anthony. And this is back to the earlier discussion, but it's an interesting point. At this point, it needs to be discussed if Jed is the right person to orchestrate the impending sell-off. That's going to be a talking point for sure. And it is a worthwhile one. If they find themselves in a position where the only option is to sell, it is not a viable strategy to buy. It doesn't make sense, et cetera, to give up what it costs to make this team better, to climb up that wild card race when the trade deadline is indeed here in a month. Should Jed be the person to make those calls? In a vacuum, I would argue no. If they're forced into that position, then he should not be. I don't want him making moves to save his job. I don't want him to be panicking and things like that. But as we've said before, this is one of those things that we've said before, you're going to learn kind of how Tom views all of this and what is acceptable to him and things like that. And Evil Wax says, yeah, it's also difficult to have someone new come in and be making those trades, or at this point, is anybody interested in Carter Hawkins doing anything? No offense to him, but his interviews are pretty milquetoast kind of stuff, and I don't think anybody's clamoring, get rid of Jed and let Carter do it. The Carter era. I don't think that anybody's particularly interested in that. But so Donnie in the chat says we're there, Corey. It's June 30th. It's sell mode. Again, I am only speaking through the lens of how I think this organization is going to operate. If they can find themselves within a couple games of a wild card spot, it doesn't have to be good enough for me. It doesn't have to be good enough for you. But there's a certain point where optics wise, business wise, they're going to pursue trying to sneak into the playoffs. I don't know what that exact threshold is. I'm aware of where they are in the standings. I've said before, my standard is certainly not, let's go for that third wild card spot. Let's just sneak in. That's good enough for me. Like, no, it is not. But the organization is going to look at things a little differently. That's just the reality of the situation. So before we get out of here, I do want to talk. Kyle Hendricks obviously struggles on Sunday. Look good for those first few innings, but then, kind of like Ian Happ trying to catch a fly ball, it flutters away in the sun and goes off the rails from there. But pairing that with Brendan, Javier Assad hitting the injured list with a forearm issue. So we'll see how long that takes, et cetera, et cetera. We also saw Hayden Wisniewski get a start this week. So curious your thoughts just on the state of the pitching staff. It felt like today from Kyle just missing more spots than we've seen. Just not getting the ball clearly where him and Amaya were trying to throw it and execute against the hitters. I see you've put up a graph. So curious about that. Curious what you think about Assad and, if he's able to come back, how they should kind of work him back in here. And, Wesneski getting that start. A lot of starting pitching thoughts for you.
Yeah, not feeling good. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it
Wow.
is. We had a discussion about Javier Assad last week, and we've had ongoing discussions about Assad throughout
Yeah.
the course of the season. The big concern with Assad was just durability and stamina. This is a pitcher who had 109 innings at the big league level last season, and he was around 90 innings prior to being IL'd at the midpoint of the season. He was on pace for 170 to 180 innings this season. The expectation he can do that every fifth day is insane. Unfortunately, caught up to him, forearm strain, shut him down. Sounds more precautionary, if anything. He was even apparently throwing today or doing baseball movements, which is encouraging. But there was a quote from Theo about Yu Darvish in 2018. And to paraphrase what Theo said, he said, can't necessarily rely on Yu Darvish coming back from his injury at the time. For this Cubs staff to be confidently projected going forward, we need to have perfect health. We need to have no possible injuries or even hiccups along the road. We need to have a track record of durability. Shota doesn't have that track record of durability. Justin Steele, although he's the least of my concerns, still have to acknowledge that September last year didn't end well. Had some fatigue, even had a little bit of a back issue. We have to acknowledge all of this. So when we approach this trade deadline, regardless of them selling or not, I think what's undeniable is they need more pitching help. Even if they want to make it through the season, I think they should go out and try to get another starting pitcher to account for Ben Brown not recovering at a good expected rate, to account for Cade Horton's prospect injury build up, and maybe he won't even pitch until a few more months because they're being super careful, to account for Assad and the forearm stuff. All of this, even Hayden Wesneski is now going to get more starts, perhaps. That may make you and I uneasy. Kyle Hendricks, ongoing process, a curveball spikiness usage to once every 4 pitches is interesting. Optimistic over the past month, but still, you don't really know if that's going to survive. And we saw it break today against Milwaukee. For the Cubs team to last, to prevent these injuries, to ensure that the Cubs pitchers are used as they are designed to be used, they need depth. And my concern continues this week, as it was from last week, that they don't have that depth at the back end because of these injuries right now. I'm worried that Assad comes back and that stress remains on him. I would like more arms. I would like actually an arm to be traded for like now, like today, to ensure that more damage is not done.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, a disappointing start from Kyle Hendricks on Sunday, but obviously he had been good, so hopefully he can continue to be there. We talked about it last week, like if you can just get dependable starts from him. Obviously, blowups are going to happen. Hopefully, next time Ian Happ catches the ball.
You're hung up on that.
Well, dude, I mean, it's like
I get it.
it feels like we've said
I'm
things
hung
like
up on
that a
it
lot.
too.
You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, every single day,
And
you know?
it's again, starting pitchers need to pick up their defense. They need to pick up the offense. Like you got to make the good pitches. You can't give up the grand slam, things like that. But it feels like there's been a lot of starts where we've said, oh, well, if they turned that double play or they made that catch or this didn't happen, the starter would have been out of the inning. And it just gets kind of tiring. But
Yeah.
you're just looking for anything from Kyle Hendricks, which he had given you in the few outings prior to today. So hopefully he can continue to do that. But yeah, this was a concern. We talked about it last week with Javier Assad that he was nearing innings limits he hadn't reached before. Obviously, this is his first time starting every fifth day at the major league level from the start of the season to the point at which he got injured. And it was one of those things where, especially the short starts, the kind of fatigue showing through those starts. And as he pushed towards 80, 90, 100 pitches, not that I expected him to get hurt, but we were monitoring stuff like that for a reason, whether it
And
was going to
I
be.
don't like his comments explaining the injury. He said he's been dealing with this for 2 weeks. And you know how I am. I'm more
Yeah.
like cautious and
Oh,
pessimistic
that sounds
watching these
like the
guys.
Cubs. Yeah.
Uh, just hear me out on this. When I
Yeah.
was watching the last start, kept going like this. I'm like, in
Great.
my mind, I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah.
probably nothing, but you never know. And it's like time and time again, I feel as if we hear those comments, like, "Oh, I've been dealing with this for a couple of weeks." We heard it even with ALLCITY. We've heard it for so many pitchers in the past. Like, can we do better on capturing these blips of fatigue or injury? And this keeps happening. If you caught this 2 weeks ago, maybe you change how you operate, and maybe Assad comes back faster and you don't put more stress on the other pitchers on this staff. So that
Yeah.
that is still a problem for me that they can't
Well,
stop these injuries, Corey, even
well,
when you see shaking over
they
there. What
wouldn't
are
be
we
the
doing?
Chicago Cubs if they didn't let a guy play down and hurt for a couple weeks or 10 days
It's
before they
n
put him on the IL or something like that. It's
I will never understand that,
a habitual problem for
even though
them.
I
Yeah.
desperately ask questions, like genuine questions why this happens. I can
Yeah.
never get a
So,
response.
but, again, it all just illustrates when we came into the season, we talked about how, you liked a lot of the names that they had as far as their pitching depth. You were curious to see what certain guys could do, whether that was Wisniewski or Assad or Jordan Wicks. But, we talked about how you need that big group. It's not just going to be 5 guys that make all of these starts from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You don't have a rotation of 5 John Lesters in there that are going to make those 32 starts and throw 200 innings. Um, and so this was always a concern. You needed that depth. That depth was going to be tested, and it is being tested. So hopefully the injury for Assad isn't a long-term thing. Hopefully Kyle can be better in that next outing. Hayden can make the most of these opportunities. But like with a lot of this team, it's a lot of question marks. So I want to end on something positive and
Oh, that
something that
wasn't
we're,
positive?
huh?
That wasn't positive right there, that
I
entire
don't think so.
75-minute
Yeah,
conversation?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, we said nice things about Michael Bush. That was positive,
You're right. We
and
did.
Justin Steele.
You're
So,
right. 2
other than
positive
that,
things.
no. But talk to me about Porter Hodge.
Okay.
Again, one of the things that it comes along with the way that the Cubs have built the bullpen for the last several years. I mean, a frequent strategy we've seen of them bringing in older guys, trying to reclaim their former selves, or bringing up new guys and trying to solve some of these things within your own system. There's going to be adjustments, ebbs and flows. There's going to be struggles, but we've seen some really nice stuff from Porter Hodge. And as we go forward here, you see it with the injuries. Leiter's out, Merriweather's out, Alzolai's out. You need guys to step up and fill those roles. You can't have the entire pitching staff be filled with um, free agents or expensive guys or things with that track record. You need those guys to come up and do those things. And Porter Hodge has done that. So reading this one, since his MLB debut on the 22nd, 11 innings pitched for the Cubs, 1.64 ERA, 15 strikeouts, 6 walks. He's looked real nice. Talk to me
Yeah.
about Porter Hodge.
You know how we always describe hitters as unicorns? Those guys who don't strike out much and hit a lot of home runs, like the Rizzo types. Today, it's the Gunnar Henderson types, Aaron Judge types. When I say the unicorns, I mean the ones that aren't the norm. And there is a technique to actually capture this. Uh, Not to get so in deep with all the math, because I just said like 20 minutes ago, I hate advanced metrics and whatever, but there is a way to kind of capture this. And so the technique that we can use actually compresses every like StatCast number that's available to the public. And in a way, we can compress this and we can look at the distance between each pitcher and see how similar guys are and how dissimilar guys are. So the question I had with Hodge is he a unicorn? Is he similar to most guys? Is anyone even close to being similar to Porter Hodge? And what we can look at on this graph here, don't need to know anything, but the only thing you can appreciate is the distance between each dot. Each dot is one pitcher, and it's their four-seam fastball. And if you notice on the very top of the graph is Porter Hodge. Again, the only thing you need to know is that the distance between the points represents some degree of similarity. Porter Hodge is away from every single pitcher. When I say, oh, he's a unicorn or an outlier, this is what I mean. He has a four-seam fastball that is not like any four-seam fastball in the league. The reason, among many reasons, is that he has that natural cut right profile. where most four seamers are thrown with some tailing action, about 7 inches of tailing action. For Porter Hodge, he throws more cutters, kind of like cutters, where his four seam fastball actually moves the opposite way from your standard four seam fastball, similar to Justin Steele, and it has some relative carry to it. And so that's unique. To illustrate this, we can look at the major league average four seam. We can look at Porter Hodge's four seam. And for sake of example, we can look at Justin Steele's four seam on one image. And this is what it would look like. In gray is your standard major league average four seam fastball. What you're looking at is that gray pitch actually tails in almost kind of like a two seamer, but not really, but it tails in more. Red is Porter Hodge's four seam fastball. And just below it is Justin Steele's blue four seam fastball. The difference is that between the gray and the colors, they have a little bit more cutting action and they tend to have same type of carry. But Porter Hodge's red four seam fastball has more carry and slightly more cut. And he's throwing it 3 miles per hour faster than Justin Steele. So in a way, you have Porter Hodge's four seam fastball, a more extreme version of Justin Steele's from the right side, of course. If he can show command, that is the problem with Porter Hodge. He had a 6 base on ball per 9 rate in Iowa. If he can show command, I'm talking 4 base on ball per 9, underneath 4, and still have the effectiveness of his four seam fastball, then he's a late inning guy. No doubt about that whatsoever. For him to reach that point, he needs to show that command. That's it. And this is all assuming that he can still have that effectiveness with his four seam fastball if he changes and makes tweaks to improve that command. This is to set expectations. When I watch Porter Hodge, I'm looking at command. Where's the catcher setting up? Where's he angling over? And if Hodge is within that window, and that kind of signifies improved command or ongoing need for improve of that command. But he's that late inning guy, man. If there's some optimism, I guess you can point towards Porter Hodge. If you want to be pessimistic, you can point towards his ongoing need for command. But guys do improve. Guys do improve their command. And Hodge's four seam is unlike no other that we've seen in the league.
No, if I was going to be pessimistic, I would say that they'll give up on him, trade him to the Padres, and he'll set strikeout records with someone else.
I mean, it's kind of funny, like not funny, like kind of dark funny. But even the Brewers, they have,
or they'll move on and start. Yeah,
they
he'll
have
start
McGill,
closing games for the Brewers.
Hudson, Colin Ray. It's like, oh my god, what are we doing over here?
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, I think that is all that we have for you. As always, appreciate you guys indulging in Brendan and I ranting, talking, whatever about this team for over 80 minutes.
I thought it was a good conversation
on a Sunday. Yeah, and look, unfortunately, a lot of the conversation feels very similar. And I think it may, as the season continues. We want to focus, as you said, Brendan, like on some of these little things, but starting the show with how interested we are in Porter Hodge or Luke Little. It doesn't feel right. It's not reading the room. It's not the right tone. And I remember watching the show. I think it was earlier this week, but when Luke threw it over to our guy Cody Delmendo, Cody was like, "What do you guys want me to do? Do you want me to yell again? Because it's the same thing I yelled about yesterday. It's the same thing I yelled about last week. It's the same thing. I don't want to. I don't want to just yell about it again. It's the same game. They play mostly the same game every day. So it's just where it is. It's frustrating. But as we've talked about, whether chasing the third wild card and being behind everybody but the two worst teams in the National League is what we want, or the rest of the fans want, or what the organization wants, if they're close enough as we go through this next month, it's going to be at least a discussion as to whether all I say when we say that is that everybody in our YouTube chat is like, they have to sell. They can't do anything but sell. All I'm saying is, let's see how the next month plays out, because it's not that simple to the people in the front office and the people in the business department of this organization. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. But it's very frustrating. A 2-5 week, and now you stare having to play a couple of the best teams in the league over the next week plus.
Great.
You are going to have to turn things around, and this is not going to be an easy time to do it. So the clock is ticking. The clock is running out, because when this episode, if you're listening to this episode on Monday, it's July. Like, the trade deadline is coming, the All-Star break is coming, and the time for, I think a lot of us are past this, Brendan, but the time from, like, they just gotta turn it around and play to the back of their baseball card. It's like that. It's July, folks.
Well, the back of the baseball card might be changing.
The back of the baseball card might be changing. Yeah. So it's, this is, you're out of time on a lot of that. And, we went through a lot of those offensive numbers, offensive numbers, a couple weeks ago. And, I remember putting it out there, like, this is like 2 months plus of just bad offense, bad baseball in a lot of respects for this team. And the further we get into the calendar, there's a lot less wiggle room for that feeling like an outlier, or feeling like something that is just magically going to change at the drop of the hat. It feels more like, as a lot of people have said, who this team is. So if this team is going to indeed wake up, as Justin Steele begged them, commanded them to do on Saturday, they had better do it soon and wake us all up from the nightmare that has been the 2024 Chicago Cubs. So
that's the way to end the show. Stop hitting snooze is all I would add to that. Got to wake up. It's July. You got the All-Star break 2 weeks from today. If you want to have any semblance of optimism, you can point towards that 10 of 11 win streak last season, but that's a crazy thing to hold on to. But we all are crazy. You never know.
Yep.
That's what the front office might be holding on to as well.
Well, and so with that, as he pointed out in the YouTube chat, don't forget to tune in, Cody, Luke, Ryan, tomorrow. They got you for the show. If you need more Chicago Cubs in your life, don't worry. CHGO Cubs has you covered. As much Cubs as you can possibly handle. Off day on Monday, and then a 6-game homestand that starts with 3 with a very good but injured Philadelphia Phillies team, and we'll take it from there.
Just win 6 in a row. That's all you need to do. 6 in a row. Feel better. That's what I want. Next Sunday, we come on.
We don't recommend any of you hold your breath waiting for that.
Well, let me tell you something. They win 2 in a row. Oh yeah, I'm thinking that. No doubt. That's how sick I am. That's how sick I am.
Good for you.
I
think that's all we have for you. Brendan and I will talk to you again next week. Enjoy your week. If you have days off this week, enjoy your holiday, enjoy your off time. If you're working, going to school, whatever you're doing, enjoy it too. Hope you all have a good week. We appreciate you tuning in, hanging out with us on another Sunday after another game loss, another series loss to someone in the NL Central. Brendan, stop me if you've heard it before. 2-5 this week for the Chicago Cubs. Not good. Getting yelled at by their ace, their leading starting pitcher. And that's the state of things. So Brendan and I will talk to you again next week. Hopefully it is a better week of baseball, at least one free of lacking fundamentals that you might find at your local T-ball game or something like that. But we'll see. It's a high bar, apparently, for Cubs to leap over. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you next week. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.